There we go. Okay. Technology is going to do what technology is going to do, but we are going to push through. Super excited for this session, everyone. I'm just going to jump right in. We have a lot to cover. And with like every time I do one of these sessions, like we're always running up on time. And I don't want that to be the case today. Who knows? Maybe I can give you some time back. No promises, though. Okay. Jumping right into it. I'm very excited for today. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Maceo Owens. I go by the ERG homegirl, she, her pronouns, all things employee resource groups. ERGs truly take over my life, but like in the best way possible. I've been an ERG leader, ERG program manager, and now it's been a little bit over a year officially that I've been full time with the ERG movement, helping companies all over when it comes to their ERG programs. I believe that ERGs don't have to be difficult. And I also believe that when you follow business development principles, so the same way that you will run a business, applying that into the ERG space, that is what helps to make ERGs much more efficient, both for the program manager and also for the ERG leader. So you get more out of what you put into the ERGs when you do it that way. There's a lot that is encompassed in that, but nevertheless, that's like my core beliefs, and that's the basics of who I am. Based in Detroit, Michigan, originally from Florida. I don't know why I always like to just add that part. But anyway, excited, like I said, to get into it. I think high level that explains a lot of who I am. Really, with the ERG movement, we're about championing change within the ERG space. And with what we're discussing today, this is an example of that, a change that needs to be championed, even if it's hard. Okay. Before we go into it, I will just plug amongst many of the free resources like this session here that I'm doing for you all. I have a ton more within the ERG champ space. Now, I'll just say, if you're not already in this space, you definitely want to join, okay? And if you have joined and you're like, I don't think I got my approval email, don't worry. I'm actually really excited. We are revamping the ERG champ space. It is a complete game changer. I've learned so much when it comes to community and software and all these things over the past 6 months. And I am excited to share those learnings with you all. Actually, right now, don't hold me to it, but I think I'm going to do a session next week that's really speaking to like your community container, which we'll talk about, which is basically your channels that your ERGs live on and what I've learned, even just having a community. Nevertheless, not really the focus of this, but I do want to plug, okay? Join the ERG Champs space, especially if this was any sort of resource to you. All right. Now, with all that being said, we are going to jump in. Now, I will just say really, really quickly before we get into it, I will just acknowledge the fact that or I'll tell a quick story. This is what I'll do. This is gonna feel random, but just follow me here, okay? A lot of people don't know. I used to be an extreme like nerd in school. I mean, I was the kid who got all my homework done fast. And there's just something that really stuck with me once that happened to me. I was in like third grade, right? And there was like a know-it-all kid. His name was Sam in the class. He was known as like the smartest. But I was like right there. But he was typically what people looked at as like the smartest. Anyway, one day in class, he actually like we were doing a math problem or something. And he said his answer, I said my answer. My answer was different. And with that, I remember that Sam, he was in my face. He was like, "No, you're wrong." He was like very smug, if you will. Um, and I was like, "No, I'm pretty sure this is the right answer." Anyway, we go to the teacher to see who was right in this scenario. And the teacher looks at the work and says, "Okay, actually, Maceo is right." And in that moment, I was just like so happy to be right. Not fully, I'm not gonna say I'm not proud. I'm not proud of this moment because it's really stuck with me my entire life. But in that moment, I looked at Sam and I said, ha ha, in his face, just like that. That's all I said. 2 words, because it just felt good to be right. And instantly, I don't know, I was just so thrown off by what happened next. Sam literally burst out into tears, like right in front of me, and like ran to the bathroom. And like the whole class saw this. And suddenly everyone was looking at me like I was a bad person. Anyway, the reason why this story sticks with me and why I'm saying it right now is in this moment, right? I feel very similar. I feel like, yes, I was right. I've been telling you all something consistently. And I feel like people haven't been taking me seriously with it when it comes to these private ERGs. But it doesn't feel good. Like, I don't really get to sit in this, I was right, because of the content of what we're talking about today and how it, I know, will frustrate some of the people who are here in this chat. Shouts out to all of you all, because I'm assuming that if you're here to learn. That's always good, but it just doesn't feel as great as it normally would to be right. I say all that to say I'll keep the energy up throughout the session. I'm happy I'm right, but just kind of brace yourselves, especially if you do have a private ERG. Now, I'm not going to be the person who's going to have you all in the chat admit if you have your private ERGs. Oftentimes, I talk to you all anyway. Your ERG leaders talk to me. I already might, but just know if you do, or even if you, not even just if people are only identifying within the space, but even if you have a private ERG, we're going to learn about what that looks like, legally speaking. Now, I did promise a few things. I wanted you all to hear not just from me. Who am I? I'm not a lawyer. I wanted you all to hear from an actual lawyer. So, thing one, we're going to jump to the big question that a lot of people are here for, just to hear it from an official source. Is it safe to limit ERG membership just to identifying members? Is the question. Actually, let me reshare my screen, as I'm seeing that you all are not seeing that. Let's see. Technology is moving a little slow. There we go. This question here, is it safe to limit ERG membership to identifying members only? I actually have a friend in the space that I've made, someone who is an actual employment lawyer. And I just recorded a quick ERG Movement podcast session. I'm super excited to get back into those. And I'm also excited to say that the episode, only 15 minutes, it'll drop right after this session ends. So if you just want to hear from her, just know that that will be out on the ERG Movement's YouTube channel. Make sure to subscribe. But beyond that, if you do want to hear just a clip of her answer to this question directly, I'm going to play that right now. Games. Red light, green light is what we're going to do. I'm going to give different scenarios, and red light means do not do. A yellow light means proceed with caution. And then green light would be for you saying, in your opinion, you're free and clear to go. You don't have to worry about much, essentially. Okay? So, first one, number one question by far. Is it, or I guess I don't know how I'm gonna phrase these questions. Should we launch ERGs and make it so that we're protecting the psychological safety of our members by only allowing people who identify with that community to join the ERG? So if you're not identifying, you cannot join the ERG.
Absolutely red light.
Wow. Okay.
Absolutely red light.
That is strong.
So here's the thing. Most folks know about the Supreme Court decisions of last year. And to boil all those words down into something very short is that if an employer is offering something of benefits to one group that is not available to another group because of their protected characteristic, and a protected characteristic is race, ethnicity, gender, LGBTQ status, disability status, like fill in the blank. If you're offering something to one group that you're not offering to another because of their protected characteristic, that is illegal. I get the idea that folks want to have a safe space, right? But that's what your friends are for. That's not what work is for. And I would rather have an ERG that supports me and my background that includes allies than to not have an ERG at all. And so when you are making the choice, and I get the part about wanting to have a safe space, meet on your own. Don't do it with your company's money. Don't do it as part of your ERG.
Okay. All right. We're going to pause it there. You're going to hear more. But I will just say, plain and simple, we heard it is illegal when it comes to having this space where only identifying members, people who identify with the community, can join. Period. There's no if, ands, or buts about it. As a matter of fact, her response to that question was absolutely red light, which means like there's no questions about it. Now, I've been saying this for some time, but like I said, I feel like just people, you need to hear from an official source. Just know I've also spoken to other lawyers, and this wasn't because I needed multiple voices. But before I even had the pleasure of meeting Tiffany, I've been really reaching out just to ask that question alone. And I was hearing the answer no repeatedly. And then I said, okay, let me get this recorded by somebody. So then shout out to Tiffany for being a resource here. Beyond that, can we just acknowledge if we are just letting people who identify with the community within the ERG, there's a whole nother issue that we're not even getting into today. That means that you're identifying people based on their characteristics. Really, when I say that, oftentimes, especially for things that aren't as visible, with that case, you oftentimes have to ask people, do you identify with this community? That's why, even if right now you're asking your members, are you an ally or not an ally? You are asking for some, what they call it, PPI, private personal information. I'm pretty sure is what it stands for, private personal information. Your ERG should not be storing that data. You are also in hot legal water if that is what you're doing right now. And honestly, this is why I get kind of like amped up about this topic, because I get frustrated that I'm like the only one saying this, like shouting it out loud. And unfortunately, I guess somebody has to be the bearer of bad news. I've met so many softwares who are telling you all in the ERG space, oh, you can have a separate space just for allies, or even as you join your space, you can ask people, are you identifying or not? Can I just say, I feel like I'm in the belief that you have to stand for something. Really? And I'm just gonna say it directly. That's why I'm really not a fan of softwares, because how are you pushing behaviors that's really putting ERGs in danger and putting therefore ERG program managers, you all who may not know any better, who you thought the software was the source of truth. So you, of course you believed everything that they said. Right now, there's a lot of companies who are in danger for doing these things. Nevertheless, no rambling today, Maceo, because there's more to discuss. All that to say, like I said, future session, we will be talking about the fact that you should not be asking folks to identify themselves, nor should you be asking about any private personal information, period, when it comes to your ERG. So if that's in your membership form, if you're asking that at all, end it today. All right, just end that today. Don't make any rash moves when it comes to moving your ERG from private to public. We'll talk about that in a second. Anyway, I do want to talk about how we got here, though. I take what am I trying to say? I have empathy for those in the space. Also, I go by the ERG homegirl. I don't know if I mentioned that earlier, so I just speak a little true to myself. I'm not really trying to cushion anything. Slides might not be perfect. I'm just here to give you the information. All right. If you're overthinking about the slide design and how I deliver, that's on you. That's just my philosophy. All right. Continuing on, recapping how we got here in the space. Now, I will say I've done this trivia so many times, and it used to be like a cute, fun thing, like, oh, we don't know our history in the ERG space. It's not like that anymore for me. Now I'm like, we need to do better when it comes to understanding the context of why we're here, how ERGs have evolved, and essentially the next piece in terms of what does the future of ERGs look like. And I feel like that back context is so, so important in where we are and what's the future. Anyway, like I said, not gonna ramble. Don't do it today. So we're gonna do a couple pieces of trivia. Put it in the chat. If you know the answer, don't put it in the chat, okay? Just let the people who don't know enjoy. All right. If you had to guess when the first ERG was launched, when would you guess? Now, comments are delayed on my end, so can I actually see your comments in real time? No. So we're just gonna assume that you're saying your answers within the chat. Okay. Anyway, answer to this question is actually A, in the 1960s, specifically 1964, which makes this the 60th anniversary of employee resource groups. Kind of iconic, I will say. And I think it's just, I don't know. It's not only is it like a momentous year, but it's just meaningful to me doing this work on the 60th anniversary. But just know these ERGs have been around for a very long time. A lot of us don't know that. Okay, question number 2. If we had to guess from where, nope, yes. What company the first ERG was launched at? What are we guessing? I'll give you all a little bit of time here. Like I said, I can't see answers in real time. So we're just going to pretend like you're guessing. Answer is Xerox. That is where the first ERG was launched. Last question. If we had to guess who the first ERG was launched for, what community of folks the first ERG was launched for? What are we guessing? Again, I'll give you all a couple seconds to figure it out. Okay. Okay. It's the answer is A. Like I said, I can't see the answers in real time, but the answer is A for Black employees. So, painting the picture here, 1964, Xerox, Black employees. Again, I wanted to touch on the history here because it makes so much sense on why we are where we are today. Okay. When it comes to 1964, yes, that was when the first ERG was launched. It was called at the time the Black Employee Caucus. That Black employee at Xerox has since rebranded. They now go by the National Black Employee Association, NBEA. But nevertheless, something else happened in 1964 that was so interesting and how these things line up. Also, side note, quick ramble. Okay, really quick one. Why is it that online on the internet you'll see all over the 70s is when the first ERG was launched? Again, don't believe everything that you read on the internet about ERGs. This is why we're here as the ERG movement to get things right, to really like set us on the right path for the future. Anyway, side note. But anyway, something else that happened in 1964, the Civil Rights Act, Title VII essentially came about in 1964. Now let's consider before 1964, people could legally discriminate against people based on their race and gender. At the time, actually, fun fact, gender was added very last minute. Originally, it was just going to be race. But anyway, race and gender is really where the Civil Rights Act started. And with that, that means that segregation was legal within the workplace before then. Also, there was a common practice of giving people from different backgrounds lower roles, things like that. That was happening before. Now, with 1964, the legal barrier around discrimination was removed. However, this opened up a new can of worms, really, when it came to the concept of integration. What's the process of actually making sure that people from different backgrounds, originally in 1964, race and gender. So when we're saying race, anyone outside of white race, and when we're saying gender, we're saying non-male. Specifically at the time, it was women. So saying that, how are we making sure that they are having a good time in the workplace? And not a good time as in fun, but that they're actually able to be their authentic selves, to get the best out of their work, to be their best selves. Okay. Now, this is where it gets interesting. This is a journey that we've been on since 1964, really around making sure that people of all different backgrounds have a great experience within the workplace, long story short. Now, even then, painting the picture, 1964, when ERGs first started, very grassroots, just in response to this need. When it comes to integration, community was the answer to how do we make sure people are having a better time within the workplace and able to feel psychologically safe. Community was immediately the answer. And that's why that first ERG was started. Again, very grassroots. They did get the permission of the CEO to start this group, but at the end of the day, it was very just like go with the flow. We'll come up with some initiatives as employees. Okay. Next up, this is what I call the ERG spread, really up until about 2019, where ERGs were still mostly grassroots. So mostly employees raised their hand and said, hey, can we have an ERG? Also then too, I call it the spread because this is where a whole bunch of different communities were launching. Yes, the Black ERG was first, but over time we saw other ERGs, women's ERGs, API ERGs, LGBTQ ERGs, disability ERGs, etc. So because more affinities were being represented. That's why I call it the spread. Okay. Next, oops. Oh, sometimes I forget. Sometimes I surprise myself with what I have in here. Now, I will just say what changed the game when it comes to ERGs was 2020. Quick pause, because I do want to mention this because someone from the UK did comment when I originally posted this and said, does this apply to the UK? Yes, because in 2010, the UK, they had their Equality Act, which basically was the same thing as our Title VII Civil Rights Act of 1964. So it still applies as long as your country has like a anti-discrimination law, then this applies in what we're saying and what we're talking about today and why you cannot have private ERGs or ERGs just for identifying folks. All right, beyond that, 2020 changed the game within the ERG space. It was so many things happen. Now, ERGs did get a bunch of good things. We got more budget, more attention. We are more valid to companies. Oh, everyone, like, okay, ERGs are the typical standard. More companies launched their ERGs starting in 2020. They were around before, but not largely popular. And even then, more communities were being supported after 2020. Well, that's the good things. However, some bad things also came with 2020. And I won't say bad, but some challenging things also came with 2020. More governance. Well, yes, now that means because we're getting more attention, more budget, that we're going to have more structure behind the work that we do. That's different from this grass works piece that we had been approaching ERGs with all this time, where it's more so kind of go with the flow. We don't have that much oversight. Now things are different. We have to start taking it up a notch. We're leveling up. We're evolving, if you will. So yes, more governance was kind of demanded of ERGs, but let's be honest, resources around the time weren't the best. I was an ERG leader during that time. Really not that many resources, much less good resources, if I'm being honest. More strategy behind ERGs. I remember so many companies during that time were also talking about, well, what's our strategy? And that's where all these random frameworks started coming out the woodworks, which we're not going to talk about today. But just know, more approaches to ERGs started to come up. Not all of them were great. Some of them were actually very detrimental to where we're at in the space right now. But I digress. Beyond that, more scrutiny also comes up. I mean, we advanced, we leveled up, which means that new things started to evolve. And unfortunately, it's like we took the good, we loved the good, and then we totally disregarded the bad. Like to this day, a lot of ERG programs still don't have strong governance, still don't have a clear strategy, and we're just acting like the scrutiny, like this is something that we shouldn't be experiencing. Or again, this is a byproduct of growth. In the words of the notorious BIG, more money, more problems. And we got more money, more attention, all these things. And therefore, the problems, they're a natural byproduct. We cannot have one without the other. So, that being said, really between 2020 and 2023, still very grassroots, but this is where companies started to lean in and say, oh, because we're giving more money, we have to have a lot of this more formal things there when it comes to our programs. And the scrutiny piece hadn't really set in too much in 2020. Not really until like early 2023, where the attacks on DEI and as a byproduct, ERGs, again, another conversation. But because companies had given resources, this is where companies started to lean in more when it comes to ERGs. Although they are always, in general, company sponsored programs, again, this is where they're leaning in more. This is why I call it the ERG boom. Again, so many companies launched their ERG programs during this time. Now, today, I call this the ERG movement. Go figure, because we didn't have a lot of that strategy, the governance, the things that really set up our program for success, the 3Ps. If you've been to a previous session, you know. If you haven't, check out the resources that we have for free around the 3Ps of ERGs, because that is basically non-existent, especially those first two ones. This is where ERGs have to do things better. And that's why I call it like legit version of ERGs, where companies they're over the programs. They're with us scaling up as an industry in the ERG space, making sure that these programs are what's the word they say? Like iron, like solid, basically. Long story short, we're growing. So with that, things have to look different on the company side of the ERG stuff. Hopefully that made sense in the context. All that to say, at one point, we had the support and all the fun things, and now we're kind of swinging on the other side where we need to take our ERGs up a notch. Period. I think we're on the same page. Okay. Continuing with our next piece. Well, all that being considered, what about if we just have a private space just for identifying? Or no. Actually, we already answered this question.
Okay.
Oh, no, we haven't. Reread this. So let's just say our ERG, we do have a space, two spaces. That's what I'm trying to say with this question. We have two spaces. One for people who specifically identify, that's private, and one larger one that allies can join. What about that? So that's the question that we are addressing in this next clip.
Okay. Fair enough. I know a lot of listeners are probably thinking we do technically have that secret space. And oftentimes it's like a private space that is still an ERG space.
but they figure people don't know about it, we can slide by. So we have a private ERG space. Let's just say it's a Black ERG. We're calling it for the culture, right? And then we also have a public one. This is the one that employees typically know about. And when they join an ERG, they think that they're joining just by being in here. But let's say I'm not Black, I'm not going to get invited to for the culture. What about that? Is that better?
So it really depends on how your ERG is set up. For every company, they should have rules about what an ERG can do and what an ERG can't do. And to the extent that you have the front facing, but the real group is behind the scenes, I still wouldn't advise that because we have activists, politicians, folks who are trying to make a name of themselves who are just trying to poke at DNI. And ERGs are low hanging fruit. And so all you need is that one person who you think was down, all skin folk and kinfolk, right? I could blow the whistle on a group and blow up the whole group. Or I don't know if these groups are limited to certain levels, but to the extent that there is a manager and above in the group, managers under the law have an obligation to report violations of policy and violations of the law, right? So you may have that manager who will have to raise their hand. Or if there is a lawsuit and there's a discovery process, and the discovery process is where someone says, here's our allegations, give me all your documents related to to these allegations. Answer all these questions related to our allegations. Discovery is very broad. And one of the questions may be identify all of the groups that are exclusive based on a protected characteristic. And if
Mm.
I'm a manager in that group, I'm a senior leader in that group, and I know about it, and the question comes to me, I have to disclose it. And you don't want your ERG to be the reason that your company's position in a lawsuit is made worse, because then you're messing it up for everybody. And
That's
so if you're going to do these separate groups or whatever, do it as a friend group. Do it as the folks you have lunch with. Do it on your own time, but don't use ERG resources. Do not use the ERG name and do not use the ERG money. It should be completely separate.
mm. Okay. Hard news. I get it. There's more. There's two more clips that I'm going to play. But I think that answers that question. And I won't ramble. We'll just hear from it directly. So, no, we cannot have this private space, this second private space that only identifying people can join also. Again, it's a protected characteristic that oftentimes ERGs are based off of. So, if we're saying that you have to identify someone who's not from that group, even if they're the majority group, can say, I'm being discriminated against because I don't get the perks of joining that community space. Okay. Well, one more thing. Well, what if it's like a secret, which let's be honest, I told you all I know what exists out here in the ERG space. What if we have a secret, like private channel just for us? And then we have kind of like this more ally friendly space. What's the take on that? Well, let's hear. Okay, that's pretty deep. I didn't even think about it from that perspective, but I have heard that even on Slack in a private channel, companies still have that. Like they could technically still pull those conversations. So it's not like
Absolutely.
hidden.
If you are using a company Slack channel, if you go anywhere and look at your company's policies related to the use of electronic communications or any of their property, that's their property. And in a lawsuit, they'll be compelled to look. If they are retaining the records for a certain amount of time for Slack, they can go in there and put in the search terms. And if your Slack comes up, that's going to be a problem. Even though it's your email account, even though it's your Slack or your fill in the blank channel, that channel belongs to the company to the extent it is on company property, their systems, hardware, anything, right? And so text messages, y'all, our secret ERG is meeting up, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, all of that, it belongs to the employer, and the employer can totally search that. And so I just say, and it's not because I'm a lawyer, right? But it's just in general. I don't want that smoke with my employer. So I'm going to follow the rules. If you want something separate, do something truly separate and on your own time and on your own dime.
Okay. Again, I get it's tough to hear where we're like, what are we doing in this ERG space then? Like you're saying that we can't have our own private space legally. Now, keep in mind a few of the things that Tiffany said. Like you could not have an ERG at all. Like, let's be honest. We can take the fact that the company is giving us money to community build among our community. And that can be done with allies. Just because allies are in the space doesn't mean that we can't build community. And also, shouts out to this comment here because I think that it really points out what we're just saying. I believe that this is from, actually, I can't see who it's from on my end, but you can't use company resources for any type of discrimination. As Tiffany said, it's like why would we want these problems with our employer who essentially is giving us budget to make the company better for our community? We don't have to like cause these types of problems. Nevertheless, we'll talk about that more in a second. But one more clip that I'm going to show you all just to answer this question because it also did come up when I posted this originally. So we have a good understanding of we cannot have a secret space, okay? Beyond that, no to that question. Okay. Is it safe to monitor who joins in order to protect the identities of members? Now, this is a question I was emailed a couple times yesterday. If you're not signed up to our newsletter, another thing worth doing. Sometimes I'll send you all quick messages of like, hey, I have this coming up. If you all want your question answered, you can get it answered. So that happened yesterday. This was one of the ones that came up. And oftentimes, honestly, with this question and even with this topic, there's really two communities in general that I've noticed in the space that really have a problem with public ERGs. Community number one is actually the Black community. More like very commonly, we want our own separate space. I get it. But actually, for this question, this is addressing community number two, which is the LGBTQ community. And with that, oftentimes the thought process behind this is, well, not all of our members are out. So is it a case where we're doing it to protect the psychological safety of those members who aren't out? So let's get the answer to this question. Can we just monitor who joins this way? Maybe if that person's manager who doesn't know or whomever doesn't get added to the channel so this person can maintain their psychological safety. Let's get the answer to that. Inherently bad that we wouldn't want that. But let's just say that the private channel, let's use the LGBTQ community, for instance, where maybe someone's not out. And we just technically, let's say that anyone could join, but it's private. So we're still hiding it, but we're going to let you join if you say it. What is that? Should we be concerned?
I would be concerned because there are people who are working overtime to roll back the rights of LGBTQ people. And that means infiltrating a group. Like folks have too much time on their hands, right? And especially with that community, you don't want to be out to people who aren't supportive. But this is the world that, we live in. And if you have true allies in that group, they'll give you your space. That you're talking about a specific topic and they're truly an ally, unless they're oblivious, which a lot of allies are, especially those who give themselves the designation. But your allies should give you that space. And in that community, having privacy is so important. But I think you just have to protect those employees. Don't have folks outing themselves. I would ask for some team agreements at every meeting that everyone, this is not a place to joke about whether someone is out or should be out or anything, and set those team agreements. But it's very hard to have a private space because, again, the law is moving into an area where you can't have anything for yourself because I'm entitled to everything. I need access to anything. I know I'm not of this community. I know I don't care anything about this community, but you can't keep me out of it because if you keep me out of it, I need an excuse to sue. And we know the US is a historically litigious society and it doesn't take much for someone to file a lawsuit.
This is serious stuff, I will say. And heavy feeling, but you did provide some actionable tips for folks on how they could hope to approach. And also, I guess to that point, it's not on the ERG, which is a company sponsored group, to really protect anyone's visible or invisible dimensions of diversity. That's what it comes down to, is what it sounds like.
Yeah, back in the day, back in my day, an employer didn't want to know anything about you. We didn't want to know your gender, your race, your sexual orientation, if you had a disability, because you can't discriminate against someone on a basis that you don't know about, right? But times have changed. Folks are open. People are encouraged to bring their full selves into work. And so those things are often front and center. Look at my office, right? Like you can't get much blacker than that. And so things have changed, but that means we just have to change the way that we're engaging with each other, and engaging with our companies.
All right. Again, we're touching on the same kind of topic where the answer is still no. All the answers to all the questions is don't do it. Just to be clear. Um which I think we've made clear. And like I said, not my favorite news to deliver. It feels good to be right, like a little bit. But at the same time, I get it. As a former Black ERG leader who had one of these channels, I get it. However, it's almost like it was mentioned by Tiffany, put very well, that it's really not on us. It's not our burden to shoulder to protect the identities of our members. I get it, where it's like, again, when we think about psychological safety, which is the name of the game, we want to create psychological safety for folks. Right now, how we're doing it, and I'm jumping ahead here, but only because we're getting to that 20-minute mark and it's like, now I have to get all the good stuff out. Okay. The name of the game when it comes to psychological safety, I was saying right now, we are protecting folks by keeping them in this box, this separate box that protects them from the outer space, which is basically the rest of the employee base. But that's not real safety when we think about it. Like safety within a box isn't real safety. We want to make sure that people could feel comfortable regardless, which to that point, again, if they're not comfortable sharing that they're out in this case, or maybe with a disabilities ERG, sometimes I might hear this with a disabilities ERG, or they might not want folks to know about their invisible disabilities. Well, they just don't have to disclose that. They can still be a member of this space where they just don't have to disclose that they have those invisible disabilities or that they are part of the community. They can actually almost be in there operating almost as an ally if they don't feel comfortable truly. But again, that is not on the ERG to shoulder, especially on you all as ERG leaders. I know we put this pressure on ourselves because we love our community, we care about them, and we do want to protect them. But it's at the stake of the rest of our community. This ERG might not exist, and even beyond just our community, the other ERGs might also be at stake because of this. Same concept, too, here. I saw a question in the chat. What about breakout groups and meetings? Same concept. We also, that would still count where someone who doesn't identify could say, well, they have some special perks of being in that space. And also, let me just say this too. This is not just me talking hypothetically that people could sue the company. This is actually happening. I was at a conference earlier this year where a software was saying, hey, you could always just like start a separate channel. And someone literally stood up in the audience and said, nope, don't do that. We actually just went through this whole legal thing, and somebody sued because of that. Even beyond that, I've had so many people come up to me, approach me, DM me, talking about, hey, we just went through this whole situation. This is no longer like an anomaly. Back back in the day, even like a couple years ago, I used to talk to some legal teams at different companies, and they would say like, oh, that's not like a big concern of ours. And maybe with the climate at the time, it wasn't. It is now. It only takes one person to get upset, to say that there's special perks based on a protected class, even if they are the majority of, like when it comes to that protected class, even if they are in a majority group, that is still right now people are taking advantage of that system. Okay. Even then, when it talks about protecting the privacy of people with disabilities, protecting the privacy truly is not necessarily saying that, hey, they're disclosing it in this private space, so they're entitled to their own private space. Specifically, when it's talking about protecting the privacy, that means that if they're disclosing it to your HR is not supposed to disclose it beyond that, which actually means you all as ERG leaders, let's say you did lead a disability ERG, you're probably not even supposed to get that information on if the person identifies with your community. That's why I'm saying it is detrimental. Like we're in real danger here within the ERG space here. I see another question. How is it a special perk if everyone's being offered a breakout group to join? A breakout group to join. I'm assuming you're still referencing like in those live meetings. If you're referencing ERGs in particular, how is ERGs a special perk if it's for anyone? If anyone has a community, I think that that's what you're saying here. High level, this is what I'll say. ERGs, they still serve such a huge purpose. Actually, I'm going to touch on how you can still make it psychologically safe and um, get people engaged, help people to kind of get the perks of your community in particular, essentially. That I don't know if that came out right, but I will touch on it. Um, I think I get the question. Let me see if we answer it within these next 15. Another question, all our ERGs all have private channels for members who sign up and agree to guidelines. Does that skirt the line of private communications? Here is what I was told by Tiffany. And you all can watch the full episode. Like I said, it'll drop officially at 1 o'clock Eastern time, so in 15 minutes on YouTube. Like the recommendation was don't have a private group because people could just use that as ammo to justify it is a secret space where it's implied that I have to identify. That was a suggestion. I would say if we were to do red light, yellow light, green light, it's like a dark yellow, like an orangish. Just be careful with it. Because again, right now it's not even taking that much justification for people to sue, and it's happening left and right. I mean, it is staggering, actually. So, would I say to jeopardize the ERG program for it? No. And the ERGs can be just as healthy when they're public. Because allies are in it and it's a public channel, it does not mean it has to take away from the authenticity, is what I'm going to say here. Okay, I'm going to push through and maybe it'll touch on how and why. All right. Like I said, psychological safety is the name of the game. We all want our members to feel psychologically safe at the end of the day. And that's why we're kind of resistant towards this. Really, even if we're to define psychological safety, another buzzword in the space, if we're being honest, I really like this definition. So it's talking about helping people to feel safe to take interpersonal risks, such as asking questions, admitting mistakes, or challenging the status quo without fear of ridicule, rejection, or punishment. I really, really like that definition. Just know we'll be diving more into that into 2025. Now, a couple of realities here. As Tiffany mentioned, all skin folk ain't kinfolk, which for those who don't know that phrase, it just means everyone who identifies with you is not your friend. I don't want to say especially in the workplace context, but within the workplace context, especially. I guess I will say that. I don't know if you all saw this viral video. I won't play it. There we go. I don't know if you all saw this viral video. This was specifically on TikTok that I saw it on. But nevertheless, a woman was in a private group chat, and one of the people who was in the group chat screenshotted the conversations and took it to HR. And this woman and 5 others all got fired. Like, this is real when we talk about it only takes one person. Your job could be in danger. Other people's jobs can be in danger. We don't, and that's obviously if there was obviously something, I don't know what they were talking about in that group chat. But the point is, even with that space where maybe we're saying what we feel comfortable saying, like even being rude sometimes. Look, I've been in those spaces before where sometimes when we let our hair down, we are saying some things that really aren't inclusive, if we're being honest. Nevertheless, we don't want to have those conversations, and sometimes that can even be the impression of folks of what's happening within our conversations is that we're just being negative. So we don't even want to do that. Also, this is something I commented last week when it comes to this whole topic. It's very interesting and ironic that we're trying to solve for historical exclusion, which oftentimes wasn't always indirect. Let's be clear. But sometimes indirect. This historical exclusion of people of different backgrounds in corporate with more exclusion, essentially. So by having these private ally-free ERGs, that's how we're trying to solve for exclusion, which I guess that would be like us trying to do workplace inclusion via exclusion, which seems inherently wrong. And I can see reasonably why people will be like, oh, I don't see how this makes sense. Even when we're talking about the purpose of our ERGs, which I talk about within our three P's presentation. But ultimately, I could see how people, allies, will be confused on what are we doing here within these spaces. And again, we're giving them ammo. When I have the fire emoji here, this is not the good kind of fire. This is like we're saying that we're trying to fight fire with fire. Again, not the solution when we're talking about what we're trying to do within our space. And again, this is not real inclusion if people are only feeling a sense of belonging within their bubble. All right, continuing on, because we just have more to cover. Oftentimes, the fear of opening up our space is rooted in something deeper. We're not going to go through this, but these are two important legal terms that are being used when it comes to ERGs. So you can screenshot the slide for the next 2 seconds, or just watch the recording where the slide will be. It's worth looking into a little bit. Anyway, when it comes to moving people to psychologically safe spaces, what does that look like? What does it look like to turn your ERG from private to public, a space that has allies in it as well? Now, Tiffany did speak to this, but we don't even have time. I always do this every single time. So just know you can watch the full recording. Okay. Again, 10 minutes, it'll be out on our YouTube. Now, just know, allies, they really do not have to kill the vibe within our space. Oh, one other thing I have to say, because I don't know where else I would say it. I also happen to know that in our spaces right now, one of the things that's keeping us from having allies join, and this is kind of going back to what I was saying with fighting fire with fire. Okay. I'm going to look at you all when I say this. I know some of us, because we're so passionate for our communities, we're upset at how our communities have been treated within the workplace, even in particular. And that's why when we do this, we're saying, oh, we're getting back at them, almost like, even if we don't say it out loud, which sometimes I have heard ERG leaders say that out loud, like, oh, we don't need them. And it's just such an aggression behind us versus them. And that is literally what I hear from executives and from allies who say, I don't want ERGs to create this us versus them feeling. That's what they're talking about, because it comes off a lot of times in how you all speak as ERG leaders. Even you as an ERG program manager occasionally speaks. And that is repelling people, and that is going to get your ERG program shut down, period. Like, I get the historical inequities and how that makes us feel passionate, but that does not give us the right to, again, fight fire with fire. It's not the solution. Not the solution. There you get more bees with honey. That's what they say, right? Okay. I just had to put that out there because I see you oftentimes, the ERG leader. I get it. Anyway, continuing. Done with that ramble. Allies don't have to kill the vibe. Ultimately, I give this illustration. I also have a video on YouTube that speaks to this, so I will just reference that. But basically, I give an illustration around. I'll say it really quickly because I think it's relevant. When it comes to traveling, there's two different types of people: people who like tourist traps and people who like the behind the scenes, like real authentic culture of things, where it's very ironic. I think that I'm a tourist trap person. I think that now I'm taking this as a learning. Like, I've really been reflecting internally on this concept because I can see now what that means with me being a tourist trap person. Just know, when it comes to being like in an authentic environment, so going behind the scenes with the local culture, you're oftentimes uncomfortable and you don't really know how to show up. And that is really what allyship should feel like within an ERG. If you think that allyship within an ERG means pandering to the allies, that is not at all what we're talking about. We're actually talking about making a space that's so safe, where your community is just doing its thing and allies are only there to learn, essentially via immersion in your culture. But oftentimes we are doing lazy leadership. We are actually just relying on this shared characteristic to carry our ERGs and to say, oh, just off of this, that's going to equal community. Where no, as ERG leaders, especially if you lead communications, you're going to have to get better at doing communications that facilitate community. And that is essentially a muscle that's worth flexing. That is creating a space, your Slack channels, to be a true culture center where, again, as people join who aren't native to that space, and when I say native, every ERG has a culture amongst it, but where people who aren't identifying with that space, where they are learning by immersing themselves in that space, not like a tourist trap where you oftentimes have to have experiences kind of catered more so to you ultimately. Going back into this, I like to say, don't let your ERG become a tourist trap. long story short, that's like the spoiler of that illustration. Again, I have it on YouTube. Definitely worth watching. Some characteristics when it comes to tourist traps. Again, very interesting. And even recently, when I went on a trip, I noticed this about myself. Like, I am happy to feel comfortable. Like, it feels, I don't know, maybe safer is the word, but we're not really trying to get psychological safety for allies. Like at this point, if your ERG is truly to build the psychological safety of your community, that's why you have to not be a tourist trap. So it's not really about making the allies feel safe. I say that with a grain of salt based on what I'm going to say next. But long story short, as a tourist trap, these are the things that you're looking for. Okay. I wish I could go into it more. Future posts of mine, okay, where we will review this in detail. Uh, Beyond that, this is another one that I came up with yesterday that I just love. Your ERG is not a space for cultural voyeurism. Like, really, again, when we're talking about um allies anyway, where sometimes we might feel like allies are just here to kind of get all of these touristy quote unquote experiences and only have like the most palatable experiences of the community and have things even worse geared towards them. That's not what I'm talking about when I say allies have to be within your space. Okay. So don't think that that is kind of what we're equating this all to, because it's truly not what I'm saying here. I'm dealing right now, one of my companies that I'm working with right now, one of the execs is this person who really wants ERGs to be palatable to them. And that's what they think ERGs are. And I'm having to regularly coach them and say, actually, no, it's okay for you to be uncomfortable as an ally. That is what the ERG is for. Because again, we're centering this on psychological safety of those who identify within this space. Nevertheless, authentic experiences, it's different. There's a different set of things that people are looking for when you are like a person who's okay with being uncomfortable because you really want to connect. You really want to get it. Again, we don't have time to go through all this, but I'm working on pacing myself better with these. Anyway, long story short, I like to say your ERG should be ally friendly, not ally focused. Okay. You're not doing allyship trainings and things like that. Allies can join, but again, our programming isn't towards them. Right now, we might have some bigger issues within our ERG and within our company that's preventing us from wanting to do allies. Oftentimes, companies, they have a bigger problem. Maybe you actually have a real issue beyond just this whole allyship conversation of the community that identifies not feeling safe within the company. Like maybe that's a broader issue and you're trying to solve for that by saying, well, let's just have our own secret space. Again, if you want to do that with company resources, that's not how it works. You're going to have to figure out, well, what does it look like to actually have a space where we're inviting folks in or at least allowing them to join. Okay. Because I know how some of you all heard that. But nevertheless, where we're also addressing that bigger problem. Long story short, I heard an ERG recently say, we get made fun of. Essentially, I'm not going to go into detail so I don't give away the community, but they said we get made fun of for being too into our community. Like sometimes people will talk about us, and it's like that's a bigger problem at the company where things are not being checked as they happen. Or maybe, oftentimes, like I mentioned earlier, we're just not the best community facilitators yet. Because how could we be? We haven't had this as a focus. We haven't had any strong metrics. We've been leaning on to measure our community facilitation. This is what ERGs are really about: is getting to be better community facilitators. I'm not saying community builders. That's a whole nother conversation why we're not saying that. Anyway, in 2 minutes, I'm going to tell you how to transition your ERGs from safe in a box, from that style, which is basically these private ERGs, to actually safe. Look, y'all, I really do try when it comes to going through these. Anyway, in a timely manner. Thing one, you could instantly react to this presentation and say, oh, it's illegal. Let me immediately go and turn our ERGs from private to public. Do not do that. 1 star. Not recommended. Okay. Talk about no psychological safety. All of those conversations that are within your channel will be exposed. And that means good or bad. And that's not what we want to do to our members. That is how we repel people from our spaces. Do not rush to say, well, immediately let's just switch this channel to public. Don't do it. Okay. Option number 2, you could say, well, we can still move it from public to private, or from private to public. But at the same time, we could just give people a heads up on what's coming and why. Again, still not great. People are going to feel almost betrayed, especially because their conversations are still there. People are going to see what they were saying before, and that feels like you're exposing them. So don't even then, I would not recommend that transition look like changing the channel from public to private and getting rid of your ally friendly channel. Okay, option number 3. You could in the private one and just say, okay, we're just going to shut this channel down. We're all going to join that ally friendly channel that we already have. 3-star, I give it. It's a step, but not the greatest. Okay. Yes, I have seen companies go this route and still be able to get a little bit of it's more work, I'll say, to build that trust when you're going and shifting people into this space that historically was known as the unsafe space, as the space. I don't recommend just shutting down the channel and having people move into the private one. So, what is my recommendation when it comes to these? I would personally say to just start a new public channel. Start fresh, okay? And I don't know why I said not recommended. Recommended is what this is supposed to say, okay? 5-star recommended. Now, when I say this, there are some elements within your new channel. Running through this quickly because I know we're at time. If you have to hop, I'm sorry, but this will be available within the ERG Champ space with our new revamp that we're putting out within the next week. So, just saying that. Really quickly, though, going through this, when it comes to the elements that you should have, screenshot it maybe if you want to. This is probably the easiest way. Context, tell people why you're making this change. Give them a little bit of time. Hey, within the next 2 weeks, this change is going to happen. Or now we're approaching December. So maybe in the new year, new channel, period. And also, I would say all your ERGs should probably do this at the same time, not staggering it here and there. Your ERG probably needs a rebrand anyway. So this is kind of the time where you can lean into that. Quick plug to the ERG Fresh Start program where we can help you with that. Anyway, setting ground rules as people join, having clear things that are appropriate. I saw Sage mention that earlier within the chat. Having ground rules is important. Having people agree to these as they join. Also, making it very clear anyone can join, and we're not going to talk about it today, but technically, you have to make it so that anyone could apply to be an ERG leader, even if they don't identify. Whole nother conversation. Okay, I get it. Just stick with me. Stick with me. Having an allyship guide, that's one of the things that I strongly recommend. And this is not a thing I hear a lot. Well, it's not our responsibility to educate allies. I get it. But it is your responsibility in this case. If you are saying that you want to protect the psychological safety of your members, then it's your responsibility in this case to do it for them. All right. So, allyship guide is another piece there. Planned programming. Well, if you're just so frustrated by having this new channel and you don't even post anything, you don't do anything regularly, yeah, you're not going to get a lot of engagement. So, you have to put things in to get something out of it. So if you want more engagement, more connections, you all are the community facilitators as ERG leaders. That is what you do as ERG leaders. You facilitate community. Having a content calendar helps you to do that. When I say lean in, I'm really saying do not worry about being too insert your community, okay? That is what your ERG is for, where this should be a space where if nowhere else people are saying this is where I feel seen. So lean into the things that make your community your community. Okay. We didn't even have time to go into the culture center thing. So for those who attended the session last week that we did at Afrotech, or maybe that was 2 weeks ago, don't worry. We're still going to have folks vote on our culture centers. Last thing, measure your impact. I hate seeing ERGs just go off of vibes. Okay. Put numbers to actually the work that you're doing. Slack has analytics. Teams has okay analytics. They have enough for you all to measure. Yeah, or Yammer, Viva Engage has analytics. Facebook Workplace has analytics. You all have things that you can leverage to tell you if you are doing well. And just know I have instructions for you all to pull these metrics and on how you can calculate your engagement within your channels. Just check out on the ergmovement.com our free resources. Look, I know this is a lot. I know it's uncomfortable, but I do want to close with the fact that this is truly what growth looks like. If our ERGs are going to this next level, this next stage of evolution, which we've been evolving over time. I showed you all kind of like the history here. We've already evolved from where we first started, and we weren't even able to go into all the pieces of evolution. This is one of the pieces here where now growth is the uncomfortable things. This is the growing pains that we have. Yes, we can look back on the old days and with nostalgia and say those were the good old days where we didn't have to, have all this governance and structure, or where we didn't have to necessarily have allies in. I get it, but we're growing as a space, and that's what the ERG movement is all about. Don't give up hope. I know a lot of you are like, I wish this could have been more positive. I wish I had more time to share with you how beautiful it could be, how well done it could be, how allies don't have to take away from your community. But we're going to have to save that, I guess. Or you can, reach out to me. I do speak to ERG leaders. I do workshops and things like that too, as a quick plug. And I will use this time for those who are still here in this session um, to announce that we do have an exciting upcoming event that is happening. The ERG tour occurred last year, free. ERG leaders in 10 different cities we went to did a free ERG summit. Just know it is coming again next year, and it's going to be even better. Okay, so I'm excited to officially announce to you all the theme of next year's tour. So shouts out to you all for staying till the end. Next year's tour theme is going to be the ERG Recipe Tour. And yes, it will even come with a recipe book. I really want to give you all the recipe for success when it comes to employer resource groups, and not just when it comes to from a programmatic standpoint, but even like with the things that you do with your ERGs. How do we make it easy to build community or facilitate community? I'm sorry, I'm striking that from my language. I do not say build community anymore. How do we make it easier to facilitate community with our communications, activities, and events that we do? That is what this tour is going to be all around. So I can't wait to see you all there. And just another quick plug, if you're interested in sponsoring the tour, just know more information is coming on that soon, but make sure to hit my DMs to like get ahead, especially if you do want to host a session at your uh company space. You want to get ahead on that because we're already forming a pretty good list of some locations. All right, that's all I have for you all today. Lots of talking, but hopefully you all got something from this session. I get that it was heavy, but I'm looking forward to what's to come in the ERG space. Okay, I want you all to trust me. It gets better. It gets better, and having allies does not have to be the end. And like I said, also too, I'm going to try to do this session next week where I chat about what it looks like or what my learnings have been really around community facilitation, even when it comes to where our community containers are, so where our communities are held, whether that's on Slack, Viva Engage, Facebook Workplace, or maybe even it's within an ERG software. But even if it's there, I'll tell you all my learnings and you all can take it from there. Deal? All right. Thanks for joining, and I will catch you all next time.